was really thinking of it, you know, sort of in a technical sense, that much control and that much, you know, con brio. It's very hard, I think, you know, to do.
Well, maybe it's also
Technically hard to do.
Well, I don't know, or it could be that I'm, you know, from New York and just long-winded and and fast talking, you know.
There's that too,
Yeah.
right? That's smart
Yeah.
and sort of, you know, smart aleck
Yeah.
too, because there's an edge to it that way. I like the vintage collector of petty, you know, or was it collector of vintage petty
Vintage
point?
petty point,
Which
yeah.
is, you know, but I mean, the other thing that I think is so wonderful about that sentence that is something as writers go along, I think they pick up expertise, and I'm just guessing since I'm not a writer and I don't presume to speak for them, is that ability to use the telling detail to really sketch in a whole character. I mean, you haven't told us an enormous amount, and yet at the same time, you've probably said almost everything you needed to say about Courtney, and just those, you know, little bits that you've pointed out. You know, it's kind of like a whole life embraced in, you know, the Shorehaven preservation and the petty point and the mother and the whatever it all is.
Well, and also I think as you write novel after novel, you suddenly realize that you're God creating a universe. I mean, you're not a very important God, and it's definitely a lowercase g, but that the texture it has, the, you know, if you want to see this universe clearly, you're responsible, and you can't put every detail up. You know, you can describe the wallpaper in the bathroom, but is that necessary to the book? So you do have to find the details that mean a lot.
You do, and I think that really telling books are the ones that, you know, where that vivid detail, because it's easier. I mean, readers have to remember and sort of unclutter their memories and all, and I think it's those books or those authors. That's why, you know, you can laugh about the iconic figure, but it's easier to remember somebody like James Bond, you know, for those few, whatever it is. And sometimes writers who aren't necessarily the best writers are the most successful in terms of audience, you know, keeping audience, because they have that ability to, you know, to give just those details, just enough for the reader to remember and not too many. And I thought that paragraph was a great example of, you know, good writing, but also of you know, the detail. Wasn't Elmore Leonard that said he leaves out the words that readers skip? Which I've always loved a lot. It's why he makes such great film, you know.
That's right.
And while I wouldn't apply that particularly to this, I was thinking of it more along the lines of, you know, you've left out those unnecessary details and focused on the clear ones. So what does Judith tell us about herself? Who is she now, 20 years later? She's a widow.
She's a widow. She went back and wrote her dissertation. She now has a doctorate in history, and she's teaching at a small Catholic college over the county border in Queens. And she, her work occasionally engages her mind, but never her heart. And I mean, the one thing that she loved to do happened 20 some odd years before, when she solved this murder mystery of the periodontist.
And so she likes detecting.
She loves detecting, but you know, you don't think of that when you're thinking, well, how am I going to support myself? How am I going to keep myself occupied? I mean, the average upper middle class North Shore of Long Island suburbanite doesn't say, oh, I'll become a detective.
Right, or even join the police force, especially in midlife. Well, so she, Courtney disappears, and she's interested. She has also these historical skills, which actually, a good historian is basically a good detective. So,
exactly.
You know, that part works. And then who walks onto the scene somewhere in all this?
Well, she, Courtney is dead. Her husband is under suspicion.
Right.
Because A, he's the husband, and they always suspect their spouse, and B, because his name is Greg Logan, is the son of a Long Island mobster, Fancy Phil Lowenstein.
Right.
So what happens is Judith goes to offer her services to Greg, who basically thinks she's one of the local loonies and kind of gets rid of her, closes the door on her.
Which is not an unnatural reaction.
No, it's a
some
perfectly,
housewife ring your doorbell.
Yes, and say, I can help you know.
Yeah.
But then who should pop into her life but Fancy Phil with neck chain and massive amounts of pinky rings.
So do you actually know someone like Fancy Phil?
Well, years and years ago, I don't normally hang out with, you know,
The
gangsters.
mafia?
Yeah. But my husband had just gone into private practice, and he did white collar criminal defense, not mob stuff. But there was a guy who might have been slightly bent, and who had an interesting appellate issue, and my husband took the case. And the guy's name, he was wonderful. It was Big Mo. And he allegedly got 1/4 of a cent on every pound of chicken that went through New York. Not bad, that's a lot of chicken.
That is a lot of chicken.
So, but Big Mo was, if there was a straight way and a slightly off-center way, a bent way of doing things, even if he made less money, he'd go this way.
Just for fun.
Just for fun, just for the joy of it. And what a great and also no pretensions about what he was. And he was smart as hell and charming. And so he sort of stayed in my mind. And the last thing I wanted to do in this book, once I started a gangster, was create another Italian gangster. I mean, you know.
You didn't want the Puzo mantle?
No, I didn't want. I mean, The Sopranos, you know, as brilliant as that is, it's just enough already. You know, leave them alone. So
Somebody actually compared this. I'm trying to remember what it was in. It's like Bridget Jones meets the
Oh, really?
Sopranos. Yeah, I think it might have been the Wall Street Journal.
Oh,
Somebody,
okay.
but anyway,
Yeah.
they did reference the Sopranos, which you know is not obviously
Right.
out of line.
Yeah.
But I realized that wasn't really the focus
Yeah,
of your
no,
book,
it's
was to
not.
talk about, you know, the wise
Yeah,
guys on
yeah.
Long Island.
No,
It's just
no.
that you needed to give a pressure cooker situation, in fact, to what's going on with Courtney.
And also that I just had great fun with this guy and with Fancy Phil. And I remember one of the early readers of the book, and someone in publishing said, "Oh, I was kind of hoping they would get together in the end." And I thought, "Oh my God."
Judith and Fancy Phil.
Judith and Fancy Phil.
Well, but meantime, off stage, and then walking on, is the policeman from Compromising Physicians, whose life has changed, and here he comes
Exactly.
back.
He was a lieutenant in the homicide division, and he's now a captain of what they call special investigations, which is, you know, overlooking organized crime. And what happened is, over the years since Compromising, I have a couple of cops on Long Island that I'm fairly friendly with, who, you know, if I have a question, I
Sure.
can give them a call. My favorite cop retired and moved God knows where. So I found myself a new cop. And he was extremely articulate. And I said, what would happen if they pushed you out of homicide for departmental political reasons? What would you feel like? And he just sort of thought for a second. He said, I don't know, it would be like getting thrown out of Eden. And I thought, oh, I love you.
Absolutely.
That really, you know, I started to see how that would, you know, help mold the character of Nelson Sharp, who, by the way, in the movie is called David Suarez because we were lucky enough to get Raul Julia to play the part.
Right.
So, but it's
But it was really Nelson.
Yes, but that was the year that every WASP actor in America was making a movie in Toronto. So.
Well, you can't go too far.
No,
wrong.
Raul Julia was wonderful.
Do you envision a movie for this? Has anybody sniffed around and
Well,
said what about?
they're currently sniffing, but you know, I said to my husband, I can't worry about this. This is between the William Morris Agency and God, and it'll happen or not happen. Because you know,